we're always going through these electrical fluxes. You even see changes that occur to our bodies in later life, as we, kind of shift between oblation and prolation. And so when you bring in these electrical phenomena into the picture, I think we not only understand that there's a lot more that we aren't even discussing yet, let alone observing, but also it puts us in a power seat in that, on this plane, we are in fact the sentient beings capable of creating those electrical vectors by way of our sentience and our thoughts.
Economists and Wall Street are sounding the alarm. Investors are ignoring the parallels between 1929, 99, 2007, and today. We are absolutely in the everything bubble, and investors are now betting on the Fed, threatening to raise rates 6 to 7 times through 2024. If the debt ceiling is raised, there will be an economic catastrophe. Learn how simple it is to add physical gold and silver to your portfolio ahead of the rise in inflation and predicted price rises. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA. Call 1-800-356-4470 and get a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer from 2016 to present, click on the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video.
And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with Dr. Barre Lando, coming to you live and correct from the beautiful state of Jefferson on the Smith River here on the border of California and Oregon. We are so pumped for the fall, even though it's been a little chilly, which should be fitting for today's guest, David DuByne from Adapt 2030. This is going to be a great one. David's returning. It's been about, 2 years since we've had David on. He was one of our first big guests on Alfacast, and he was so cordial enough to come on when we were just a little YouTube channel with 800, if that, subscribers, and really helped us out a lot back then. And we're just really excited to catch up with David and see what he's been up to. Lots been going on with AlfaVedic. If you guys are new to AlfaVedic, check us out at alfavedic.com. I will make this short and sweet today, Bear. We've been getting some people complaining about our long intros to our free 2-hour podcast with no ads. So I'm sorry about that.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me want to do 20 minutes of infomercials that we've never done.
Exactly.
Did you ever complain to the TV stations about too many advertisements before the program and during the programming, and the break between the end of the program and the next program starting? I don't think so. It's
unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. And believe it or not, those haters, we actually have a community that cares about what we're going to talk about in these little short intros, like the fact that we just did an amazing little giveaway from Leela Labs, which does this amazing quantum technology, which I have right here, their infinity block behind me, David. Really interesting technology that you might want to look into, because I know you're keen on this stuff. It creates a toroidal field, according to their studies, that allows you to charge different metallic objects with quantum energy. And they also have brilliant healers that are internationally known that can see frequencies and imbue frequencies in these cards. Besides that, that's about all I got. Cordal 2.0 launched today or yesterday. For those who aren't familiar with Cordal, and David, I'd love to talk to you a little about crypto today, because I know you're keen on that. The cryptosphere is very interesting. It seems like a lot of it's been co-opted into Wall Street 2.0. We're seeing the SEC crack down on that. I'm part of a project called Cordal, which is kind of like a Bitcoin 2.0 in the sense that it was very much from the ground up, made from scratch blockchain project with a bunch of cypherpunks, no corporation behind it, very decentralized, all open source. You can find out more at cordal.org. What's unique about Cordal, besides the egalitarian minting protocol that shares every minute block reward with everybody minting on the network, which doesn't require any ASIC miner or anything big, hefty machine to do it. It's just based on time and proving yourself over time. is that the database is very fascinating how it works as basically a decentralized CPU. And we're very close to launching our data nodes, which will be decentralized web hosting, or truly decentralized web hosting. So David was just talking about how he's been censored and being attacked by the centralized forces. Well, we are creating a solution that will allow for a completely censor-proof internet. Very exciting time. So check that out at Qortal.org. That's QORTAL.org. Today, David DuByne returns for a grand solar minimum update and how we might prepare for the changes it will bring to a world already on the brink. Grand solar minimum expert David DuByne from Adapt 2030 returns to Alfacast for an update on the effects of the incoming solar cycle. Drastically cooling temperatures are already upon us, and the cyclic solar-induced climate changes have been historically paired with the rise and fall of empires. Its impact will indeed be dramatic, especially in light of the purposeful chaos now being orchestrated on virtually every level of our lives. In our first episode, David shared stunning information on the disruptive effects of a cooling climate on food production, finance, and every aspect of human interaction. Take heart, though, as we'll frame this intensity of this topic with solutions available to most. David is masterful in his presentation of the quote-unquote science behind the grand solar minimum, but always from the larger perspective of thriving versus surviving, and the spiritual opportunities belying all such epochal times. And yes, I believe we are entering a new epoch. We can get into some theories on that. Barre Lando, how are you on this glorious morning, Thursday morning?
Doing wonderful, and especially excited about our talk. David, thanks for being with us again. And yeah, as Mike said, I want to echo that. Thank you so much. You know, you really helped us way at our beginnings here. We're still kind of newbies, but you know, just trying to get our, you know, the message out just like you are. So thank you for being with us again. I wanted to reconnect with you for actually quite a while. As you know, I run a farm here. I farm full time. I've done it for a good number of years now. And it's interesting because when you do that, you have a feedback mechanism, you know, with which you're growing in nature around you that tells you exactly what's going on out there. And not only from year to year, but you get to, if you stick with it long enough, to get to see more long-term trends. And what I've noticed in about the last decade is, we're getting earlier and earlier falls. The last 3 years, we've had these kind of freak early frost, and it's required me to harvest earlier every year. This year, we started earlier in anticipation of that, but the frost came earlier, so we're going to lose some crops again because of it. So I'm pretty convinced that something's happening out there with the climate. I don't think it's our fault. I think there's larger cycles, at play. And of course, that's where your expertise lies. And, there's that old saying that things happen gradually, then all of a sudden. Well, I kind of suspect that we're in the all of a sudden stage right now. So what do you think? And, I'd like to get into current events and how they're playing in with, your knowledge base and what you bring. But if we could, maybe have a little bit of a preface as far as how you got into this, we can make it short because I know you've done this 1,000 times. And, just maybe a little cliff notes of what solar minimum is in the first place. So thanks again, and take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. And I'm so glad that you're expanding, and still in the information space, because the people you interview and all the guests that I see you come on, because I get your emails when you have new interviews, and when I'm preparing something, I'll click on and listen out the side of my ear there. It's great that you keep going and keep putting out such valuable information in this time of change right now, because this is what we need, is so many minds coming at all these problems that are coalescing at the same time here, and we're going to need a myriad of solutions. So I love that you went from 800 and you're well over 10,000 now, and it's going to continue to grow because you reach that rollover point where then it's 10, and then suddenly it's 25, and then suddenly it's 50. And the more the world seems to be turned upside down on its head, the more people are out there looking for solutions. And then they're you'd be surprised what you consider as just a normal go to work, hardworking person that's always bought the mainstream media's explanations for XYZ is suddenly going, wait a second, maybe I need to look over here for some alternative information because what has been fed so long doesn't seem to fit what's happening anymore. And I've noticed that it seems to be a mass awakening of, this epoch you're talking about is a vibrational change. So when you look at it in terms of power structure from top down governance, that was set in place in a different vibrational frequency field, and people were born into that same frequency field. So something that was in the 1940s, 1950s, you were born, grandparents in or older parents born into that. They were born into the field, so that top-down approach worked because they were born into the same frequency. But now as we're transitioning out, and we've actually into the age of Aquarius back last year, and the planets were so close together, and the telescope looking at those just a couple of degrees from each other, transitioning to a faster energy, and people are awakening from that. So from a realistic approach, the way they have put this top-down pyramidal structure, and everybody knows the pyramid, top 0.0001% down, corporations, the military, and then people at the bottom. Okay, that worked for that denser energy field. But as the sun's stepping down, our solar system's changing, and I'll go into all the changes on all the planets that have occurred in the last year and a half. The control structure of the elite over the planet needs to change also, because their frequency field is changing. Their awareness is, people are piercing through the veil now. So a new system of control needs to be put in place for the new vibration frequency. And then you talked about cryptocurrency, the old fiat money system based on acquisition, war, and control. That doesn't work anymore. So what is it going to be now? Well, it's moving to crypto. And like you say, crypto can be your bondage or it can be your freedom. Ticket out, both apply with the same technology, as with all technologies. So when you look at it, so many things are shifting right now with this great reset, and they're even broadcasting it. They're resetting on purpose, and they're telling you they're resetting because they have to reset, because the old power down structure is not going to hold, and everybody's awakening too. So now a whole new way of life being controlled, and those with the money and the power broker and the elite are still trying to keep themselves in control, moving into the faster energy field. And we can see it all around us. Things aren't making sense anymore. People are asking a lot more questions, but then there's this whole new grid moving in, the separation of people. I think they're terrified of us and our manifestation capabilities, not only you and myself, visually by ourselves creating our own reality and busting through this chrysalis, for a better word, but hundreds of people getting together. Elite are terrified of this because our manifestation's ramping up and faster and almost real time now. So one person, yeah, they can do what they're taught or programmed or thought to think to manifest for the elite. What they want is the outcome, but put a bunch of people together that do question the narrative, don't go along with that anymore. And that becomes a real threat, because 10 people, 100 people that have an alternative way to manifest in this frequency field is definitely throwing a wrench out there. That's the reason I really believe that we're being so separated at the moment. Our capabilities to overthrow these reigns of power are at our grasp again. And it only comes around once every several thousand years. And you see the amount of effort, time, coordination, and all out destruction of everything we've ever known to keep us separated during this most pivotal time of change. Now, it might sound a little outlandish, but when you start to understand the frequency of the sun is changing, and the output in the visual spectrum, and the amount of cosmic rays bombarding our planet, which also have an effect on species themselves. You see all these things lining up into perfection right now. It is an awakening, but this whole dense, darker energy power wants to grab you and like pull you back into the soup as we're trying to rise out each day more vibrationally light. As we go around the full circle of the yugas here, as the best way I can describe it, I'm really getting back into the Indian Vedic texts and the yuga cycles, because I do believe we're coming out of that Kali Yuga into the Dwapara Yuga, and the elites know it. They understand these grand solar minimum cycles. They know there's not going to be enough food. It's going to be a lot of panic, and they're going to get overthrown again. So they're trying to stop all this, and then all those other layers of things are happening at the same time. It's such an amazing time to be alive. Truly is.
It is, and I think what you're describing is an overall consciousness shift, and it's a matter of choice. I think people are making right now, as far as, which bandwagon they want to jump on. And the way I see things is that the so-called controllers are really at a disadvantage because they're playing the same old game by trying to retool their control technologies. And meanwhile, those of us that are going with the shift, it's making available to us all different sorts of insights, new technologies, ways to produce things that aren't reliant on old manufacturing methods. Here on the farm, we're constantly expanding our awareness of how to grow things. We're in the Northwest and I grow things that are tropical that aren't supposed to grow here. So there's a lot of things we're catching up to. And of course, that thing you're talking about as far as things speeding up, that's a real phenomena that we can explain with waveform physics. And so all of these things that weren't available in prior times, including this knowledge of, what makes us tick in the first place is really putting us, I think, in the most favorable position historically for humanity, even though it really looks like all hell is breaking loose. That's not to minimize all the real things going on, and most likely the chaos will continue to see and also escalate. But I think it's important always to just reframe it in that, we are being led by higher intelligence, including, you mentioned, the sun and planetary bodies and things. Well, those are all living intelligence as well. And of course, when you're in the flow drafting that higher intelligence, then magic starts to happen and all the solutions appear. So sorry, since you opened the door to that, I just want to make a quick comment.
Well, I did open the door because I knew you'd respond to it in a way that I couldn't phrase it, because I have my little niche of understanding the frequency field and the cosmic ray density increases. And then on the planets, you might just sit there and go, whoa, these guys are talking woo-woo mumbo jumbo there, where there's new agey junk. It's not, because let's start out, if we go back to May of 2020, Pluto's atmosphere collapsed. And that should be a wow factor and go, wow, that really has. So there must be some electromagnetic effects happening within our solar system. And then Neptune, 6 months later, reversed its atmosphere. And that should have been a double wow, that's incredible factor. And then Uranus, the rings around there were X-ray jumps that were visible with the naked eye. Now, normally a lot of this stuff would happen in a different spectral wavelength that would require instrumentation to view and quantify. But the X-ray discharge was so heavy that it was visible with the naked eye, jumping off the planet, grabbing on the rings, and then shooting out into what we consider space. But no, it was following on the Birkeland currents and the electric field lines that you can't see that are invisible to our naked eye. So when you start to see something at this proportion that's so far exponentially above the charts to see X-ray, it's, when you look at an X-ray flare coming off the sun and the way that they categorize different flares from the sun, you got the M flares, and of course, the most famous are the X flares. When you look at that, it actually has an X pattern, and when it goes zzz, and it comes off the sun, you can actually see that X shape from the discharge pattern with such heavy intensity. But for an outer planet to jump with the X-ray visible to the naked eye out to the rings and then continue down the field lines is just something to behold. And then I was talking before the broadcast here, I have a telescope that I moved out of the back here. Jupiter's auroras were 10x, and they kind of dissipated a little bit as the sun's turned on for solar cycle 25. But when it went to the low just maybe 6 months ago, and even in the last 3 months, you could see blue halos coming off of Jupiter. The aurora were 10x more intense. And then one of the latest things that's happened just 2 months ago is normally when you have northern and southern lights, you need a magnetic field. So those lights of charged particles can follow down the magnetic field lines, illuminate that, and then we start to get the aurora. And if it's really intense, it'll make like a cylindrical cone where it'll follow a magnetic field line down. And that's why you get some really brilliant blues that are almost like a cylinder coming down. And the auroral ropes, and there's different type of twisting auroral ropes that, positive, negative current going around each other that follow those same field lines. But Mars doesn't really have an atmosphere or a magnetic field that creates an atmosphere like Earth. What it does have, though, is mineral in the crust. And aurora started to come out of even the equatorial bands off of Mars, where the aurora were coming out of the mineral composition of Mars crust. That was about 4 months ago. So I'm looking saying, Earth is next here. If you're going to be coming from the outer planets coming in, so what types of things would it be looking for? And you mentioned toroidal fields there. Jupiter is going to swing past the Earth coming up in the first part of 2022, probably around March. I can give you an exact date if I get back on the JPL models to see when that's going to swing in front. As soon as Jupiter swings around in front of the Earth, we're going to be locked into a second magnetic field until 2024, where it's a perfect square. And that has a looping toroidal field as well associated with it. But if you think about Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune as one new magnetic field forming, interlooping on itself as a solid magnetic field, slight, but its own magnetic field. We got Mars and then Earth, which means we're 2 planets away from that. But then we have the sun stepping down, and we're the 3rd planet away from that. Now, nothing goes to 0, so there's probably going to be a balance and equilibrium of that of the decrease off the sun and some sort of equilibrium within that second magnetic field. So if you're talking about looping toroidal waves, we're going to come in, and the Earth's going to be right in the center there, 2024. But as Jupiter swings past here, we're going to have an enormous amount of crustal damage coming up here is the best way I can put it. Earth cracks, land subsidence, land upwelling, instant land upwelling like we saw in Haryana in India, earth cracks all over the place. There's as many instances of this happening. So you come into something called the Bosch wall when these 2 toroidal fields are looping in on themselves. There's this equilibrium midpoint where those 2 magnetic fields are over looping on themselves, and it's called the Bosch wall. Well, we're going to be in that Bosch wall square in the center in October of 2024. So if you're looking at this from a perspective of a government trying to still retain control on the planet without sending all out unbelievable panic across the airwaves, we don't even know what's going to happen with the second magnetic field. For sure, after March and April of this year, when Jupiter swings past and we get more locked into it, we'll have a good idea of how much damage it's going to do to the infrastructure on the surface of the Earth. Now, take that into perspective on the possibilities of you coming down into decentralized agriculture, starting with your own garden, regional trading, because things are going to start to get cut off at the edges. So maybe this is some of the reason for the supply chain disruptions. Already a built-in excuse there. Because are you going to come clean with the populace? Like, hey, the reason that bridge collapsed over there. Oh, the reason the rail lines ripped over there. Oh, that landslide that took away that road over there. That was just because it rained a lot. On that land that lifted up 30 feet in the middle of a farm field, that was just because, there was a pipe under there and the gas compressed and it uplifted the earth that way for 2 miles that direction. Like, they're going to give you some easy excuse in the news, but to come clean to say our earth is going to start rifting in the top 2 miles of the crust as we enter the second magnetic field. By the way, your intuition, your manifestation capabilities, and the whole electric circuitry of the planet is going to leave electric striking and plasma discharge in the skies in front of you for 8 to 10 to 12 seconds, where you're going to see things like Chaco Canyon come to life in front of you in the next 3 years. But please keep going to work. Please keep paying your taxes, and please obey the rule of law. Okay, now let's go.
Wow. And David, that's
all true. And I can prove every single thing I just said with an enormous amount of backed up science on this and instrumentation, everything you want. I can back all that up.
And when you say science, you're not talking about corporate scientism. You're talking about empirical data that you're collecting on your own or through trusted sources, not necessarily NASA, which we know is the lying entity of the corrupted centralized forces, because we're obviously triggering people in the comments already here. And one thing I said is because we do have, we have some folks in there that are like, what's he talking about? And to deny the fact that astral bodies have an effect on this, whether you call it a planet, a plane, whatever, that's ridiculous. Of course they do. But what I was going to ask you is, are you familiar with this idea that the Earth is expanding too? That we're going through an expansion part that is related to all these energetics, and that also some of this cracking that we're seeing and is actually due to the Earth growing at this time.
I was hoping you both had the answer for that. Something I wanted to ask you both, because I'm looking for that answer myself. There's a lot of information that I'm trying to collect as data points, but I don't have it all. And you have a little more. That's more your niche of understanding that, and torsion physics and plasma expansion, et cetera, at cores. So I was hoping maybe you could.
Well, maybe Barre has a little insight onto this. Barre?
Well, we could go off into some tangents about that.
You should.
It might be.
Okay. You should.
So Well, I look at things a lot differently. I believe there are technologies involved in the planet itself. Another whole discussion that perhaps are responsible for a lot of the mechanisms that we see and associate with just our reality here. And also there really needs to be a greater understanding of waveforms, because you can't have physicality without a waveform, and then the physicality is nothing more than appearance. But the thing is planetary bodies, just like anything else, are always under a state of flux of going through states between electrical prolation and oblation, those forces, so it can actually change the appearance of things, how things operate. And if we're just sitting back and I think arguing about the shape of the world, or perhaps if the world is in fact living, I think there's more than ample evidence, when you get into the bottom line understanding of just ourselves as people. For instance, we do the same thing that our planet, we'll call it, does, in that we're always going through these electrical fluxes. You even see changes that occur to our bodies in later life, as we, kind of shift between oblation and prolation. And so when you bring in these electrical phenomena into the picture, I think we not only understand that there's a lot more that we aren't even discussing yet, let alone observing, but also it puts us in a power seat in that, on this plane, we are in fact the sentient beings capable of creating those electrical vectors by way of our sentience and our thoughts. And, we are very active participants in this, in this experiment, we'll say. So I know that's kind of roundabout, isn't really answering your question, but it does open up into an entirely new field that would explain things in entirely different ways. It would be probably very amazing and even stretch the imagination of most people.
And on a more metaphysical side of things too, if we consider that Gaia or Sophia is a living consciousness entity, and we're going through a consciousness expansion right now, that could crystallize in the expansion of the physical form too, of course. So there's and you're talking about these heavenly bodies, these planets, David, too. I think of Rudolf Steiner and his notion of these planets emanating from Earth or from consciousness. And this gets a little trippier, but these are living, breathing entities themselves that are directly electrical, right? And are all communicating each other through the ether or through the electromagnetic, whatever we want to call it, right? This invisible force that you talk about, the Birkeland, whatever we want to talk about. And so we are in a live, connected reality. And I think with the materialistic reductionist science that we're forced under, they refuse to look at that. And so, this is really important, I think, for climate and understanding how the climate works, because I personally believe we can affect the climate with our own consciousness. And that's why we've done shows about orgone technology and Wilhelm Reich. And I think it's important because it can help us look at solutions for helping us with our farm here, with impending potential, June and July frosts, for all we know, with this grand solar minimum, what the sun's doing, and understanding really what the sun is and what the plasma is and how all this affects directly with our consciousness. So for me, it's really exciting because I believe we are finally getting into the enriched science that we really need to be diving into, and through both observation and understanding the spiritual side of it more.